The Middle East continues to be a region fraught with tension and conflict, where geopolitical rivalries often erupt into deadly confrontations. Recently, the region witnessed a significant escalation with Iran, launching its 26th missile attack targeting Israel, marking one of the most destructive strikes in recent years. The attack resulted in the near-total destruction of a prominent Israeli city, causing massive infrastructural damage, civilian casualties, and widespread panic among the Israeli population. This latest missile barrage represents not only a tactical blow, but also a symbolic message of Iran's continuing hostile stance toward Israel, exacerbating an already fragile regional stability. Context and background. The roots of the current conflict between Iran and Israel are deeply embedded in decades of hostility and strategic rivalry. Iran, governed by a hardline theocratic regime, has persistently refused to recognize Israel's legitimacy, viewing the Jewish state as an existential threat. This animosity has fueled Iran's backing of proxy militias such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and various groups in Gaza, which have often engaged in intermittent skirmishes with Israel. The conflict intensified over the past year due to several converging factors. These include the failure of diplomatic efforts to contain Iran's nuclear ambitions, increased Israeli military operations in the West Bank and Gaza, and the recent assassination of high-profile figures linked to Iran's military and nuclear programs. In retaliation, Iran has systematically escalated its missile and drone attacks on Israeli targets, with the recent strike being the 26th in a series of sustained offensives. The attack, scale, and impact. In the early hours of the attack, Iran launched a sophisticated missile salvo from its territory and allied regions including southern Lebanon and Syria. Utilizing precision-guided ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, the strike targeted the city of Ashkelon, a strategic port city on Israel's southern Mediterranean coast. Ashkelon, known for its dense population and vital infrastructure, became the primary target due to its economic importance and symbolic value. Destruction of Ashkelon. The missile barrage resulted in unprecedented destruction across Ashkelon. Key government buildings, residential neighborhoods, commercial centers, and energy infrastructure were severely damaged or completely destroyed. Among the worst hit was Ashkelon's main power station, leading to citywide blackouts that compounded the chaos. Hospitals struggled to operate amid power failures, forcing medical teams to rely on emergency generators to treat the injured. Residential areas bore the brunt of the attack, with hundreds of homes reduced to rubble. Entire apartment blocks collapsed, trapping families beneath debris. Emergency services reported a high number of casualties, with initial counts indicating several hundred injured and dozens confirmed dead. Rescue operations continued through the night and into the following days, as emergency crews combed through the ruins searching for survivors. Civilian panic and displacement. The psychological impact on the population has been profound. Ashkelon's roughly 140,000 residents experienced immediate panic and mass evacuations as missile warning sirens blared across the city. Thousands fled to temporary shelters and neighboring towns, fearing further attacks. The widespread destruction of homes forced tens of thousands into displacement, with many seeking refuge in overcrowded community centers, schools, and government facilities. The sense of vulnerability extended beyond Ashkelon. Across southern Israel, other cities and towns activated civil defense protocols amid fears of follow-up attacks. Schools and businesses closed indefinitely, and public transportation was severely disrupted. The Israeli government declared a state of emergency, mobilizing military and civilian resources to contain the crisis. Strategic and political implications. Iran's latest attack carries significant strategic weight. It signals Tehran's capability and willingness to conduct sustained missile warfare against Israeli territory, despite international sanctions and diplomatic pressure. By striking a vital urban center, Iran aimed to demonstrate its operational reach and resilience in the face of Israeli countermeasures. Regional reactions. The attack has drawn swift condemnation from Israel and its Western allies, including the United States and European Union. Israeli Prime Minister described the attack as an act of terrorism aimed at civilian populations and vowed a strong military response to prevent further aggression. The Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, announced immediate retaliatory strikes targeting Iranian military infrastructure in Syria and Lebanon, intensifying an already volatile regional conflict. Meanwhile, Iran's regional proxies, including Hezbollah, praised the attack as a victory and called for continued resistance against Israel. This rhetoric threatens to escalate proxy warfare along Israel's northern borders and within Gaza, raising fears of a wider regional conflict that could engulf neighboring states. Impact on Israeli domestic politics. Within Israel, the attack has heightened political tensions. Citizens demand stronger government action to ensure their safety, putting pressure on Prime Minister and his security cabinet. Opposition parties have criticized the government's intelligence and defense readiness, accusing it of underestimating Iran's threat. Public opinion polls indicate a surge in support for increased military spending and harsher retaliatory measures. Furthermore, the humanitarian crisis has prompted urgent calls for relief and reconstruction aid. The government faces the challenge of balancing military responses with the urgent need to provide shelter, medical care, and psychological support to affected civilians. International response and diplomacy. The international community's response has been largely unified in condemning Iran's missile attack, but diplomatic pathways remain fraught with challenges. United Nations and global diplomacy, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session to address the escalating violence. Most member states called for restraint and a peaceful resolution, urging Iran to cease attacks on civilian targets. However, divisions among Council members, notably Russia and China's more neutral or sympathetic stance toward Iran, have hampered unified action. Efforts by key global powers to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, JCPOA, have been complicated by the current violence. Western countries stress that Iran's aggressive missile attacks undermine diplomatic goodwill, while Tehran insists that its missile program and regional activities are sovereign rights. Humanitarian aid and support. Several countries and international organizations pledged humanitarian aid to Israel to assist displaced citizens and rebuild infrastructure. Medical teams, supplies, and financial assistance are being mobilized to help cope with the immediate aftermath. However, aid distribution faces logistical hurdles amid ongoing security threats and disrupted communication lines. The fragile security situation also complicates efforts to deliver aid to border regions vulnerable to further attacks. Human stories, lives shattered. Beyond the statistics and military analyses lie the real human costs of the attack. Families torn apart. In Ashkelon, stories of loss and resilience are emerging amid the devastation. Families have lost loved ones, homes, and livelihoods in the span of hours. Parents frantically searched for missing children amid the rubble, while hospitals worked tirelessly to save lives. One survivor recounted the terror of waking to explosion sounds, running to bomb shelters with her children, and returning to find their home destroyed. Community groups have mobilized to provide emergency counseling, food, and temporary housing, highlighting the resilience of the local population despite trauma. Psychological impact. Psychologists warn of long-term mental health effects on survivors, including post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Schools and social services are preparing to address these challenges as children and adults cope with the psychological aftermath. What's next? Potential scenarios. The recent attack has escalated the Israeli-Iranian conflict to new heights, leaving the region at a crossroads. Military escalation. Israel's immediate military response could provoke further retaliations from Iran and its proxies. This tit-for-tat escalation risks drawing neighboring countries into conflict and possibly igniting a broader regional war. The involvement of international powers with vested interests in the region adds further complexity. Diplomatic efforts. There is cautious hope that renewed diplomatic efforts might de-escalate tensions. Back-channel talks and third-party mediation could help broker temporary ceasefires or confidence-building measures. However, the current level of mistrust between the parties makes this a challenging path. Humanitarian focus. In the short term, the focus must remain on humanitarian relief. Ensuring the safety, health, and well-being of displaced and injured civilians is paramount. Reconstruction efforts will take months, if not years, requiring international collaboration and funding. Conclusion. Iran's 26th missile attack against Israel marks a grim milestone in a conflict that shows little sign of abating. The destruction of Ashkelon and the widespread fear among Israeli citizens underscore the devastating human and material cost of ongoing hostilities. As the region grapples with this new escalation, the international community faces a critical test in balancing military deterrence